2025 is going to become a world where fraud is going to be very, very common. There is an overproduction of content, and what we are lacking is a good amount of curation. I didn't really have to know a lot of programming in order to get started. I can essentially do a complete, flip of Oral's personality and try to misplace and be a bad actor. The reach of AI, the democratization of AI, is really happening pretty rapidly. Hello everybody, I am Sayan Bhattacharya, founder of Dialmate AI, the company empowering this podcast, the Digital Mindmeld. With over a decade of experience in AI and signal processing, I have had the privilege of working across diverse industries, solving complex problems using AI and cutting edge tech. My journey has spanned over 4+ years in the industry, in signal processing and artificial intelligence. Here on the Digital Mindmeld, I want to bring the ideas behind AI in terms of its development, as well as how this technology is going to basically graduate over time in this particular space. So I thought that there are a lot of content right now available in the net, and the web is full of it. Basically, there is an overproduction of content, and what we are lacking is a good amount of curation, because we need to kind of take the wheat from the chaff. And that's exactly what my purpose and objective is with this podcast. So, as a digital curator, basically, I first want to kind of give an impression of exactly where we are, roughly, so that we can get into the details of AI. And I want to basically share a presentation with you guys in order to continue this conversation. So, right. So, in this Digital Mindmeld podcast, I want to essentially curate you all an experience of how to essentially catch up with the modern trends, how to understand what is exactly the more functional framework of AI in this modern society, rather than a more science fiction-y impression. So this would be a lot in the focus, and I want to take a moment to talk about Dialmate AI. It is an AI mediator for professional relationships, and its intention is to form balanced, productive relationships in the professional environment. And by taking artificial intelligence and the cutting edge tech what we have right now, we can essentially understand the context and nuance of every particular interaction, and thereby give effective feedback. So this is for the first time, I think, that we are building a technology that gives you feedback on your communications, on your day-to-days. It also would involve a lot of translation and a lot of gap when it comes to emotional expression. So I want to first highlight the journey which you're going to take today in this podcast, our first episode. And I want to first start with the capabilities that AI has in the current landscape, with how much economic impact and money basically it is driving, and in which kind of way is it driving, and what does it even mean. And I also want to essentially tie the whole aspect of money, economics, with energy, and the fact that that is something which is going to become a very important concern for the day, and for some time right now. And of course, which also would bring a lot of the more common questions, which probably you guys are always thinking of, that it would take your job. And therefore, it might bring a meaning crisis, even if you're paid in order to just sustain a living. So, without further ado, I want to first come to this particular uh, slide where you can see that how much time exactly AI has the potential to save. So if you consider research, right? Like, I mean, in order to figure out what is the right thing for you in order to conduct a particular research, imagine you're a graduate student and you want to essentially write a paper. So you need the state of the art and you want to cite them at your references. So in this particular use case, you definitely would spend above 3 hours, because you need to essentially read, for instance, the abstract title, of course, and then you read the conclusion. That's the most minimum amount of reading that you can do in order to come to a decision whether it's relevant or not to you. And then you are already missing all the details. But that's not the case with AI. So if even if we may like kind of come up with 10 minutes, right? So if we just check this out, and right. So uh, AI AI and savings. That's right. So even if we are kind of saving 10 minutes, right? 10 minutes per day, what that kind of results in is, let's say that there are 760 million users, right, who are engaging with this particular technology, and that was basically multiplied by 10 minutes. So that's basically 900, like roughly, I mean 800 to 900 million hours, right? And that's, if I just translate this into time, how much this much million hours mean, then it's clear that we find that it's 100,000 years for one day. So we save 100,000 years per day, right? For only a savings of 10 minutes. So that can compound over time, right? So just to give you a little bit of an estimation of how much this costs, because this was about the time. So 1 kilowatt hour is the amount of energy spent by an athlete per day, right? Please do pay attention to the word athlete. An average human being definitely doesn't spend 1 kilowatt hour of energy per day. So we, as humans, we have reduced that down at this point into, in Germany, this is 60 to 70 cents when you buy your petrol, right? So this is one aspect of reality which is basically quite important, right? And then this is another aspect of reality which is quite important. And if you see that there is a savings of energy, right, if time is basically being saved, and then there is a savings of time, and that's like a win-win basically for both. So it's making your place, your earth, much more greener, and it's reducing your time every day, and you can do something else with that time, right? So but this requires much more of a sophisticated discussion, definitely, and we are going to have that. So if I just go back, I mean, it's very common for programmers, if they have been using the state of the art AI co-pilots. Of course, GitHub Copilot being one of the most popular. And then there is, right now, the Cursor is basically a very, very popular choice amongst programmers, and it can clearly cut up to 50%. I mean, 30% of the time of development is taken on boilerplate, like what exactly is kind of required in order to start a particular project, roughly speaking, right? So that's 30 million hours saved daily, right? If you take an example of healthcare, and it can reduce like 6 to 10 hours per week of a doctor, by cutting off the overheads. And if you I mean, I grew up in a time basically when we used to kind of have the analog phones, and there was no digital phones at that time. And like, the way with which the measurements were being taken inside a hospital versus when I went next time in the hospital, I mean, I was just shocked. Like, that's a big leap, by the way, right? So, debatable which hospital am I talking about, of course. But keeping that aside, we will get into that, of course, but that's in a much later part of the podcast. So, um, an Accenture study essentially provides that about 1.5 to 2% of productivity boost has been happening due to AI. So if you just take a look, right? I mean, one second. Yes. So 3% per annum is how much the GDP of the world is growing per year, right? So it's 3%, right? That's not a bad number, right? And this is, let's imagine that this is 2025 at the time of recording. And I want you guys to figure out one thing with the compound interest formula, which is amount equals principal 1 plus, the rate divided by 100 and to the power n, where this is your time, an unit of time, and this is your rate of interest, right? So imagine that if it is 3% and you have a certain principal, right? How much would it change from 1950 till today? And the other thing is that how much it would be taking from 2025 up to 2039, let's say, right? So how much essentially is increasing in GDP? And what does that mean, right? Write that down in the comment section, and I will be discussing them in some of the next episodes in much more detail. But in order to basically give you an estimation of exactly how much increment can be done further with AI, an additional 2% can be even done with AI, right? And that also at reducing the operational costs by 15 to 30%, cutting the global emissions by 4 to 10%. And I mean, and clearly the energy that is going to be saved, like we saw, we took a small leap into that, and we'll get into more of that. So before getting into the details, I first want to motivate everybody about a visual, exactly, like how was it before and after. Like on the left hand side, you can see that this is around the mid 1800s, and you see a lot of horse. And if you know anything about horses, they have plenty of poo. So that compounds too, by the way, right? And when it compounds, it brings in with it typhoid and probably some variation of I mean, it's New York City. I was about to say malaria, but that probably doesn't exist there, hopefully. But the idea is that, like, on the right hand side, if you look, we have a huge amount of change. There is, of course, a lot of issues with the emissions from the vehicles, but that's also being under active research. and there has been quite some interesting technologies that can fight um, the whole global warming and the climate change issue, which is a very deep issue again, and it's much more nuanced, of course, and then compared to what you see in the left. Like, first thing to realize is that it's much better on the right. Okay, so it's not a picnic to be in 1850s New York. So just making a small SWOT analysis, essentially, I mean, we clearly can see that there are strengths in AI, right? So it can boost the annual GDP by 1%. We can see that the demand of energy is going to increase because AI is very power hungry. As it saves the energy, it also creates a demand for it. The other aspect, which is related to human resources, and that is about jobs. So what's going to happen to jobs? Like, is everybody going to lose their jobs, or is everything going to turn to a utopia? So you see that there's a spectrum in this entire narrative. On the left hand, I mean, you can imagine that you have this dystopia where everything doesn't work, and on the right hand side, I mean, in the left hand side, you can think of it like uh, Brave New World, if you know this particular book. And on the right hand side, it's like everything is going very well, at least apparently. And I mean, I, I mean, on the left hand side, I think you can take 1984. On the right hand side, you can take Brave New World, and it's kind of interesting, basically. But none of them might actually happen, because there's only 1% which essentially believes in the positive and optimistic aspect of technology, and they benefit at the end because technology has the power to take a quantum leap from point A to point B, making the older technology completely irrelevant. And we have seen that oftentimes happening. And it's also very important to mention that sometimes we have missed it. For instance, if you see the Native Americans, they were very good with pottery, right? And they had this particular pottery, the equipment, and that was exactly a wheel. It looked exactly like a wheel. It was a wheel, except for the fact it was it was orthogonally placed from what we actually have as a wheel. So if you just make a 90-degree rotation, that becomes the wheel. And you can be, if nobody came up with that idea, essentially, that like if we put four of these, and on the top, if you can put a wooden pallet, I mean, you start moving from point A to point B. I mean, that's immediately changes the game altogether. And I mean, horses, and then of course finally cars, and it can go on and on. So what's important here is that we must have a framework. We must really have a framework, right, on how to understand and judge whether a particular piece of technology has a potential to do such a transformation or not. Is AI all snake oil, right? I mean, let's take a few examples, right? So I have Oral here with me, and I have taken about 3 to 4 of your pictures, right? And I want to basically take the flux model over here, right? It's a LoRa trainer, right? So it's an algorithm with which you basically can train large language models and effectively. Let me just sign in, right? Exactly. And over here, if you see that I have already kind of trained Oral's model with those 4 or 5 pictures which I've taken from him. And now what I can do is essentially I can simply put a particular prompt, and I have also made the AI labeled that this particular entity in the picture is called as oral. So it will understand whenever I press oral, right? Because that's what the trigger word is. So I can essentially do a complete, like, I mean, flip of oral's personality and try to misplace and be a bad actor, right? And try to essentially, um, I mean, make a lot of bad stuff. Just let's just put it this way, right? So oral in a party drinking alcohol with a lot of friends, right? So let's just see that. I mean, oral is not below 18. So I don't think that he is gonna be having much of a complaint from anyone. But hey, I mean, just have a look at this. So this is not very good, firstly. So we can completely take this away. You can take the other one here, right? So I'm just gonna do one more, okay? So I just can take this model and put oral anywhere, right? So oral looking into the camera with a suit on. This is a LinkedIn headshot, right? Which is a great use case, by the way, for this. And all of this, for this, you have to just pay cents, right? So it's pennies at which basically which you can get this. Like if you consider the, like, okay, I mean, come on.
So I have a question.
Yeah,
So you're saying that AI on its own it isn't bad, but people can use AI to make bad decisions or like be bad actors.
yeah,
So
yeah.
how can we stop those people from committing those crimes? Like there are gonna be a group of people that know how to use AI more than others. Like you said, 1% of people are gonna use AI more than others. So how
Right.
can we, the mass that don't know how to use AI, go against them?
Right. So that's like a question, and kind of I don't really have an answer to. I mean, because I'm not a security expert. But one thing is very important to understand, that 2025 is gonna become a world where fraud is gonna be very, very common, because it's very, very easy to kind of uh, flag intelligence. And you can just put a proxy for any kind of qualifications right now. Like, I can basically put this in my portfolio, and I can fake that I'm a photographer, and all I did was just take a few photos of oral, which I can easily take it from Instagram, right? And yeah, so it took about 11.6 seconds, if you see over here, right, in order to get a output. And the whole training probably took about less than, I would say, 10 minutes. So it's a very, very fast training that happened, which is actually a fine tuning method. But right now, I'm just showing you a couple of examples, right? Now, if you see, uh, I have one more example to show you right now, and that is in this popular low code no code platform called make.com. Okay. So, what I'm trying to convey here is that, like, the reach of AI, the democratization of AI, is really happening pretty rapidly. So, if I just want to use, for instance, a Telegram bot, and want to have essentially a language translation. So I can just take, for instance, this template, and I can get this template, for instance. I've already taken it here, right? So I have set up my Telegram bot, which is not very difficult to do. I'll just give you a quick demo of that. So you first open your Telegram. Come on. Exactly. right? And what you do is you come to bot father and you just start. Okay, you create a new bot, right? And you need to make a name for it. So just name uh, new great bot. Okay, so it must have. Okay, so new great, it should be bot underscore bot. Okay, let's say new great one. Okay, for whatever reason, I mean, it's not just working at the moment. Let's just say, how are you gonna call it? Let's just call it D and D. So let's call it D and D underscore bot. This is already taken. Interesting. So you can take Tetris as it is suggesting. It's invalid. Okay. Let's say, for instance, we take a name called Open Bot. Already taken. Okay. There is something clearly wrong over here. I mean, I'm gonna try one more. So first thing is that I can show you my bots. So these are my bots already, right? So there is one bot, there is for oral, which I already prepared, right? So I can clearly use this particular bot to have the discussion, and I can have it over here. I've named it, given it a weird name called Translakaka, right? And I'm just gonna use this bot. And over here you see that I have just connected this with OpenAI, and none of this requires coding, right? All I'm asking here is basically to translate this to English, and the text content here comes like, this is the first name, this is the last name, right? And I need your help in translation, and this is the role over here. So this is essentially the user that is prompting, and over here this is the system that is defining the role of the system, what exactly ChatGPT should be focusing on, right? So I save this, and then what you do is you further get back like the message content, whatever is coming out put as an output of the particular uh, bot. And I can take the message ID with the same ID as the one I started, and I save it, and it is basically running. So I can just go to my translation bot and say in Bengali, ভাই আমাকে রসগোল্লা খাওয়া. Brother, I want to eat Rashogolla. That
So
works. Yeah,
there's no need for prior coding knowledge in order to achieve what you just did, right?
not exactly. I mean, the code is essentially nothing but an implementation of logic, right?
So as long as you're logical, you can do everything you just did.
Yeah, pretty much. So if you just like look into this particular format, they are very visual, right? They're all boxes, and all they need are metadatas, which you have to basically input. And here I've used a Telegram bot so that I don't even have to kind of build something else in order to interact with it. I can use WhatsApp as well, right? So these, and just if you see that if this is the possibility, so we can do anything, that means, roughly speaking, right? And I'm definitely not going to be acting super optimistic of this, because I already showed you on over here in the Flux demo that this is basically what can be done by only taking 4 images of oral, and if he can get a headshot from me, I can also put him in very shady places and also do some stuff with that. So, I mean, the scope of, I mean, bad work is enormous, right? So that's also one thing that I really, really want to kind of emphasize, that it's very, very crucial and to understand that, I mean, 2025 onward, we need to have a very good idea of security. And security is a big issue, essentially. And not just security when it comes to, I mean, your monetary assets, but all your digital assets, because soon I will basically be inside of another paradigm or a rabbit hole where you will find that the asset that is most important right now, which can get you the most amount of value over time, and we are going to discuss that through a different lens. So I'm not going to be too much. I'm not going to talk too much about that in this particular episode. So clearly, I mean, we can see, I mean, the potential, right? I didn't really have to know a lot of programming in order to get started. And I trained a model over here, and I just had to do a few when I was training it, and write down in the comment section if you want me to do a complete review of Flux. And if you find value in this, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. It really helps, and we are right now in a very early stage of our startup. The more we can reach out to you, the more we can help you. So please, please, please subscribe. All right. So if I now come back over here, back to the presentation. So before AI, we had to do a lot of boring tasks. And what I also want to basically take as an example, which was a prime issue among software developers, is burnout. And David Shapiro is an excellent proponent of this particular idea. And I think that anyone who has worked in the tech sector has gone through burnout. And a lot of it was when it came to debugging something which is extremely badly documented. So, going through bad documentation and trying to come up with creative ideas on how to solve a particular problem is is something that puts a heavy tax on the brain, and that compounds over time. So AI brings a breath of fresh air, right? So that's for sure by now, and also saw how exactly AI is capable of improving your lives today, because a lot of our lives are digital. Let's take a quick review of how human needs are based, and this is the classic. This is the Maslow's pyramid of needs, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it starts with the most obvious, and which is water and food and shelter. And if you are just not aware, I mean, there are really like places in the world where water is not basically still even today not accessible. The people need to travel for an hour to get water, right? And I have myself lived in Chennai in India, where I didn't have 3 days of I had to spend my 3 days without water, basically, right? It was, and it's very hot in Chennai. So water is really, really crucial. And 50% of the world right now is basically not being fed rightly, right? They're starving. So that's also the other statistics of the needs when it comes to populations. But as an individual, if we kind of take this investigation further, I mean, we need a lot more other accessories in life in order to make it fulfilled. So we have emotional needs, we have our creative needs, and finally, I mean, we want to get into the realm of self actualization, and that can also be through psychedelics, through meditation, through through any form of investigation, essentially. Uh, but that can only be done under the condition that you have already met all your needs below that. So, certainly, once you get more time, you can focus on these needs, right? So, you can clearly see here that our basic survival basically is taken care of properly with at a price which is quite acceptable in many areas. And we do have a situation with the internet right now that everything is connected, and the open source ness of technologies, the very fact that vast amount of knowledge base is available so that you can learn any particular technology that is available, which was not possible in the earlier days. I mean, if you check Dr. Jack Cruz, he spent above $90,000 in the 2000s, early 2000s, in order to translate a couple of Japanese papers. So yeah, that's a ton of money. The other thing that is quite happening, and there has been a raise of voice on this particular agenda that is related to creativity. And I think that with AI, human beings are gonna get even more creative, right? So, because it aids the process of a lot of overheads, it essentially takes them away and gets you the fun stuff pretty quickly. And but then again, we have to come up to the question of what exactly is the need of creativity. But that all we can investigate in further episodes. There's a $25 trillion economic potential, right, of AI, and that's the projections for 2035. That is pretty huge, and 40% of jobs are going to get transformed, and then the productivity gain is basically going to be above 1%. And what I want to do further, basically, is to give you some sense of a tool which has been making a lot of noise recently, called Manus AI. So,
Hmm. So I have a question.
yeah,
So what exactly is Manus? Because I'm a tech guy and I don't know about it. Can you please explain?
right. So, Manus is basically an AI agent, right, which has access to plenty of information, right, from your day to day, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, resuming. So, Manus AI is basically an AI agent. It is very similar to ChatGPT operator.
Is it a large language model?
No, it's very different from a large language model. So, an agent essentially is something you can imagine it as a particular mediator or a particular router. Essentially, you can think of this in computer science terms as a router, right? Where you can essentially route things. So, imagine that there is an input which is coming as text, right? And it requires tools. Now, a large language model, right? This particular entity on its own doesn't have any access to tools. It just it takes input as text and gets output as text. And we're going to be investigating the chat GPT model in much more detail in the next episode, and give you a much more cleaner picture along with some of the math. But for now, you can essentially think that it's a text in, text out kind of a model, which is trained on all the data that is available over the web, roughly. That includes the Reddit, Wikipedia, and everything. And what an agent essentially does is it gets access to a tool box, right? And toolbox can be comprising of various tools like calculator, a Python runtime, right? A tool could be, for instance, an API to book flight tickets, which is, let's say that it can ask it to fetch some data on what exactly is going to be uh, yeah. So we can ask, we can just make this a little bit, because I'm just suddenly seeing what the hell is this, so I have to make a new task. Okay, now it's fine. Nah, resume. Yeah, so a toolbox can consist of an API to book flight tickets, which means, for instance, you can ask, you can query the next flight that you have in order to reach Singapore from Frankfurt, let's say. And then the step would be essentially to firstly agree with the time, and then you can book, right? So, what an agent essentially does is, first, it understands the flow of the problem, which is what event happens after what, right? So, this can be event A, then event B, and so on and so forth. Then it documents all tools required to achieve our goal. So remember again, right? So you have a goal, okay? And this is something that you want, right? You have a vision of your goal, right? And you have a question as an input. The agent is someone who is the middleman, right? Who wants to bridge this gap. So first, what it does is it understands the flow of the problem, how it can be temporally placed, right? And this could be easily done with large language models, for instance. I mean, it's very difficult to find out how many threes are there in 343353, right? Like if you type, I mean, if you just type, you can probably you might not end up finding the right answer. So I can just show you, for instance, if I come over here, right? How many right over here, if you look into this particular answer, right? It has already a Python interpreter. Now it can definitely give you the right answer, but without the Python interpreter, just on its own, it sometimes might fail, right? And I also want to give a deep dive of this particular tool called Abacus AI, right, in our next episodes. So, because it's a very affordable form of AI to be used for our day-to-day work.
And what is Abacus? Is it like a large language model or an agent?
No, no, no. Abacus is basically a subscription. It's a subscription to a wide array of large language models and agents, right? So,
With Abacus, you can have access to ChatGPT, Cloud, Perplexity.
yes, so you can already see over here that you have up to 20 LLMs what you can access to, right? And you can also have the open source one and the closed source ones, right? And then you can also build custom bots, and you can integrate your GitHub, right? All of this is possible. Also with Abacus, you will be given a computer of your own, so you can see the cursor moving and doing all your job as much as you're prompting, right? So that is really quite fun and exciting.